Imagine waking up in the silent middle of the night when everything seems frozen in time and suddenly realizing that something is about to happen, something no one can see, but that changes the course of an entire life. That's how today's story begins. A hospital in Italy, cold lights flickering in the corridors and doctors racing against the clock while a boy struggles to keep breathing. Inside, machines beep, alarms sound, and every second feels like an eternity. Outside, the mother prays, repeating the same words endlessly, as if each phrase were a thread still holding her son to life. And while science said, "There's nothing more we can do," the unexpected was silently approaching. But here's the detail no one expected. At that exact moment, when hope seemed to have vanished, something invisible and completely outside of human logic began to happen. Something that neither the doctors, nor the family, nor anyone in that hospital could have imagined. What this boy saw that morning not only surprised everyone, but challenged everything we know about limits, destiny, and faith. Today, you will discover what really happened in that hospital room. You will understand why this story became one of the most investigated by the Vatican and how it ended up being officially recognized as a miracle. And more, you will see how a friar who had already departed this world returned inexplicably to change the future of a child. Prepare yourself for one of the most exciting and mysterious stories involving Padre Pio, because what you're about to hear isn't just an account. It's a real event that left doctors silent, religious figures in tears, and the entire world without answers. And it all began that morning. Want to know what really happened? Then stay with me until the end, because today you'll understand the day the impossible simply happened. To understand why this miracle became so well known, we need to go back in time a little and meet the protagonist of this story. Matteo Colella Matteo was an ordinary boy, just 9 years old, who lived a peaceful life with his family in the small town of San Giovanni Rotondo, the same town where Padre Pio spent much of his life. Matteo was like any other child. He liked to run, play, get into mischief, invent adventures, and come home with scraped knees. He was nothing extraordinary, until fate decided to intertwine his life with something much greater. It all started when Matteo developed a high fever that wouldn't go down. At first, everyone thought it was just a bad case of the flu, but within a few hours, the situation changed completely. The fever rose uncontrollably, his eyes became heavy, the little boy began to hallucinate, experiencing severe pain all over his body and losing consciousness. That's when his parents rushed him to the hospital, never imagining that this would be the most terrifying moment of their lives. Upon arriving at the hospital, the doctors detected something terrible: meningococcal meningitis, one of the most dangerous and fast-moving diseases in existence. In children, it can progress in a matter of hours, and that's exactly what happened to Matteo. The infection spread throughout his body with a speed that shocked even the most experienced professionals. His organs began to fail one by one. Matteo was no longer unresponsive, and seemed to be sliding towards a place from which no one returns. The situation became so serious that the doctors were frank: the chances are minimal, almost zero. These words fell on the family like a dry blow. And when the news spread through the hospital, even nurses accustomed to dealing with emergencies fell silent. The boy's case quickly drew attention for a simple and terrible reason. Matteo was losing the battle faster than any child should. But what no one imagined, not the parents, not the doctors, not even Matteo, is that this ordinary, frail boy on the verge of death would be the protagonist of one of the most inexplicable events ever to happen in an Italian hospital. And it is here that the story begins to change direction towards the impossible. Want to know how? The early morning of June 20th, 2000 was marked as one of the most difficult for the medical team caring for Matteo. It was as if, from one moment to the next, all the lights in the hospital had become colder, quieter and heavier. The doctors were already vigilant, but at that moment they realized that something serious was about to happen. Little Matteo began to show signs of septic shock, the worst possible reaction to an infection. His heart weakened dangerously, his breathing became short and irregular, and his skin began to lose color. It was like watching a flame slowly go out. The machines began beeping incessantly, filling the room with a desperate sound. The professionals rushed over, adjusting medications, trying to stabilize the boy with everything that medicine had at that moment. Every second felt like a race against an invisible clock. There was tension in everyone's eyes. Even without hearing a word, you could understand what they were thinking. We're losing him. The team did everything they could. They tried to raise his blood pressure, stimulate his heart, protect the organs that were already failing. But even with all their efforts, Matteo didn't react. It was as if his body had given up before they could do anything more. The air in the room seemed still, heavy, as if the environment itself were holding its breath. In the hallway, the mother held her hands and repeated a trembling prayer, asking for strength, asking for a miracle, even without knowing if anyone was listening. And the doctors, already exhausted, reached the point that no professional wants to reach: the silent recognition that they had done everything possible within human limitations. At that moment, it seemed that science had put a final stop to it. There were no more treatments to try. There was no more time to wait, and it is precisely when the impossible seems inevitable that something extraordinary usually happens. You're about to see how Matteo's story takes a complete turn, and no one in that hospital, not even the medical community, was prepared for it. And it was precisely when all seemed lost that something completely unexpected happened. Something no doctor could measure with instruments, record in exams, or explain with diagnoses. While Matteo lay motionless, surrounded by tubes, wires, and beeping machines, he experienced something that would absolutely change the entire story of that early morning. According to his own account, in a moment of profound darkness, when he could no longer feel his body, a presence appeared beside him, a presence he described with a certainty that sent shivers down the spines of even the most skeptical. Matteo says he saw a friar with a white beard, wearing a simple brown habit and with eyes that seemed to understand everything without him saying a word. The figure approached slowly, silently, without causing fear, as if it had been there for a long time, simply waiting for the right moment to act. The boy, even though weak, felt a profound peace, something completely different from anything he had experienced since he became ill. He recognized who it was immediately: Padre Pio, that same friar whose photos he had seen on the city walls, the saint of sorrows, the protector of the sick, the man, many said, continued to intercede even after his death. Matteo described how the room, despite being full of equipment, became silent as if time had stopped. Padre Pio leaned over him, gently placed his hand on his chest, exactly where the pain was strongest, and said only two simple words but full of power: "I'm with you." From that moment on, Matteo said he felt as if a warm light ran through his body, as if something was pushing the pain away, expelling the fear and returning a strength he didn't even know he still had. He described the sensation as an embrace from within. And most impressively, this encounter was not vague, confused, or imagined. He remembered every detail, every gesture, every feature of Padre Pio's face so clearly that it left the adult speechless when he recounted it. The boy, who minutes before had been on the verge of death, stated with complete certainty, "He came, he was with me, and he wouldn't let me go." What nobody knew at that moment was that, in just a few moments, the monitors would show something that would leave the medical team shocked and absolutely without explanation. Want to see what happened? After that mysterious encounter, Matteo began to recount something that left everyone impressed. He described details that there was simply no way to know. For a boy of only 9 years old, weak, unconscious, and surrounded by machines, his words were so precise that they caught the attention of even the most experienced doctors. And this is where the story gains even greater weight, because every detail Matteo said matched exactly with historical accounts from people who claimed to have seen Padre Pio. The boy said he felt a strong floral scent, something sweet and gentle at the same time, which completely enveloped him. This perfume wasn't in the room, it didn't come from medicine, and it had no logical explanation. But those who know the life of Padre Pio know. Dozens of testimonies affirm that the saint frequently appeared accompanied by an intense floral fragrance called by many scent of sanctity. How could Matteo know that? He also described the brown habit, the friar's simple belt around his waist, his white beard, and even his serious yet kind expression, as if he were watching over him with his eyes, were all noteworthy. Matteo recounted that he saw the Padre Pio's hands. He said that it seemed as if they shone from within, as if something inside them carried light. This ties in with another striking detail, the stigmata. Marks which many devotees said emitted a slight spiritual warmth. But what truly left everyone speechless was a small detail. Matteo said that, while he was unconscious, he felt as if someone held his head. He carefully wrapped the habit, like someone protecting a sleeping child. He even described the texture of the habit's fabric touching his face. These details weren't in any painting, any photograph, nothing the boy could have seen before. Matteo said that Padre Pio spoke to him, but not with long sentences. They were simple words that seemed to go straight to his heart, as if the voice came not only from outside, but from within as well. He repeated it several times. He told me that I wasn't alone. These details, so specific and so improbable for someone unaware, made many believe that Matteo had truly experienced something extraordinary. And the most surprising thing is that soon after this encounter, the impossible began to happen. The monitors that had previously only shown worsening conditions began to change, and change quickly. You are about to see the point where science simply fell silent. What happened in the following minutes left everyone at the hospital completely bewildered. It was as if the room where Matteo was had suddenly gained a new energy, something invisible but impossible to ignore. Until shortly before, the monitors had only shown falling numbers, low blood pressure, critical saturation, weakened heart, organs failing. The medical team was already preparing for the worst. But then, everything began to change. Without any new medication being administered, without any new procedure being initiated, the numbers began to rise. First slowly, as if the body were rekindling an internal light that had gone out. Then faster, like someone who starts breathing again after being trapped underwater for a long time. Oxygen saturation, which had previously been dangerously low, rose almost instantly. Blood pressure stabilized, as if obeying a command from elsewhere. The heart, which had been weak and irregular, began to beat strongly again, a clean, solid rhythm, impossible to explain in that context. The doctors looked at each other, confused. There was no scientific explanation for it. They checked the equipment, examined the valves, looked at the graphs, restarted the monitors, everything to try to understand what was happening. But everything was working perfectly. The change was real. It was immediate. It was impossible. And, above all, it was inexplicable. Meanwhile, the nurse who was following the case reported something that still sends shivers down the spine of anyone who hears it. She said she felt the atmosphere become lighter, as if the air had suddenly been renewed. Some professionals, even those who didn't believe in spiritual phenomena, admitted they had never seen such a serious situation almost completely reversed in such a short time. It was as if an invisible thread had pulled Matteo back, as if something or someone had intervened at the moment when all seemed lost. And what's most impressive is that this sudden improvement wasn't an isolated spike. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a coincidence. The equipment continued to show progress, minute after minute. His body was literally reacting in a way that contradicted what any medical textbook predicted. At that exact moment, no one in the hospital knew that Matteo had just experienced something that would change not only his life, but also the entire course of a process that would end years later in the Vatican itself. And if you think that's impressive enough, wait until you see what happened when Matteo finally opened his eyes. The following days were a mixture of tension, hope, and surprise. Despite the sudden improvement, the doctors knew that Matteo was still in a coma and that the situation remained delicate. They maintained constant vigilance, monitoring every heartbeat, every organ signal, and every fluctuation in the graphs, hoping to understand what was really happening. But nobody, absolutely nobody, was prepared for what would come next. After a long time unconscious, enveloped in the profound silence of someone struggling to return, Matteo finally opened his eyes. And when he did, it wasn't in that confused, lost, or disoriented way that usually happens to patients who emerge from such a deep coma. No. Matteo opened his eyes as if waking from a very real dream. He blinked a few times, took a deep breath, and looked around clearly, a clarity that took everyone by surprise. The nurse called the doctors immediately. They rushed to the room expecting to find a confused boy, unable to remember what had happened. But Matteo was conscious. He knew where he was. He knew what had happened, and he knew exactly what he wanted to say. When they asked how he was feeling, the answer came quickly and firmly, as if he had been waiting for that moment. I saw Padre Pio. He began to recount every detail of the encounter with the same precision that had already left everyone perplexed. He described the room, the touch on his chest, the subtle perfume, and even the words spoken by the friar. Matteo spoke with such certainty that no one could doubt him. It wasn't imagination, it wasn't a dream, it was memory. And what impressed the medical team the most was another unbelievable revelation. Matteo remembered phrases spoken by doctors while she was unconscious. He remembered the movement in the room, the voices, the sounds, the changes in the equipment. He described things that only someone fully awake could perceive. This simply shouldn't be possible, but it was. The mother, hearing her son repeat, "Padre Pio was with me," burst into tears. The doctors remained silent. It was as if Matteo had returned not only alive, but with a truth that no one there knew how to refute. His recovery from then on would be as rapid as it was surprising. And this extraordinary transformation raised an alarm in the Vatican. Something big was happening there, something that needed to be thoroughly investigated. And it is precisely here that the story takes another leap, because the next step would involve experts, cardinals, theologians, and doctors from all over the world. When Matteo finally woke up and recounted everything he had experienced, the news began to spread rapidly through the hospital. First among the doctors, then among the nurses, and soon it reached the walls of the administration. Such a serious case, with such an inexplicable recovery, could not go unnoticed. And in a short time it reached where no one imagined, the ears of church. And when the church heard, it knew exactly the weight of that event. After all, Padre Pio was one of the most studied and researched saints in the world. To understand the seriousness of this, it's important to know that the Vatican doesn't call just anything a miracle. On the contrary, every inexplicable cure goes through an extremely rigorous process. And that's exactly what happened with Matteo's story. An official commission from Congregation for the Causes of Saints team in Rome was called in to analyze the case. It wasn't just a group of priests, it was a team made up of renowned doctors, specialists from various fields, theologians, historians, and investigators trained to detect any error, exaggeration, or mistake. The first step was to collect absolutely everything: medical records, exams, progress charts, reports, Admission forms, statements from the medical team, and even accounts from family members. Nothing escaped analysis. It was like putting together a scientific and spiritual puzzle at the same time. And the more they examined the case, the more perplexed they became. The Vatican doctors, who are first and foremost scientists, confirmed the extreme severity of the meningococcal meningitis that Matteo suffered from. They confirmed that his condition had reached the point of organ failure, something that normally has no turning back. They confirmed that there was no new medication, no unexpected intervention, no experimental treatment that would justify the sudden reversal. What's most impressive is that all the experts came to the same conclusion, and that rarely happens. They said, the recovery is complete, sudden, and without scientific explanation. This opened the door to the second phase of the investigation, the spiritual one. The committee also wanted to know because Matteo claimed to have seen Padre Pio, and they wondered why he described such precise details that coincided with historical accounts. They wanted to know how a child in a coma could remember phrases spoken while unconscious. They wanted to understand how a boy condemned by medicine had awakened with such lucidity. And the more they delved into the investigation, the clearer it became that this case might be precisely what was needed for a much larger process within the Church. Something that would change Padre Pio's story forever. And this is where the script gets even more surprising, because the next step involves a decision that wasn't easy to make. The Vatican was about to officially recognize a miracle, and it all started in that small hospital with a boy who shouldn't have survived. As the investigation progressed, the Vatican's Medical and Spiritual Commission began to uncover details that made the case even more extraordinary. It wasn't just Matteo's unexpected recovery that was striking. It was everything surrounding that moment, the testimonies, the coincidences, the parallel accounts, forming a picture so surprising that no expert dared to dismiss it. The hospital doctors, who had been monitoring the patient's hospitalization from the beginning, were interviewed individually, and something remarkable happened. They all confirmed that Matteo was in an irreversible critical condition. There was no room for optimism. The progress reports clearly showed that the organs were failing one by one, and that science no longer had the resources to reverse the situation. When Vatican researchers asked if any change in medication could have caused the sudden improvement, the answer was unanimous. No, nothing we did explains what happened. But what truly perplexed the team were the additional accounts, things Matteo described that could only have been perceived by someone fully conscious. The boy recounted in detail phrases the doctors said to each other while trying to stabilize him. He described the sound of shoes on the floor, the metallic sound of instruments being positioned, and even a doctor's voice saying, "Prepare everything. This could be the end." These phrases were confirmed by the professionals themselves, who were completely astonished to learn that the boy, technically unconscious, could remember everything. And there was more. The parents reported that at the exact minute that Matteo started to improve, they were praying intensely to Padre Pio, asking him to intercede for their son. The mother recounted feeling a strange warmth in her chest at that moment, as if someone had placed their hand on her, something that, according to her account, brought a sudden peace amidst the despair. For the Commission, this set of factors was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just an inexplicable cure. It was a cure surrounded by testimonies, exact coincidences, impossible memories, and a direct link, emotional, spiritual, and temporal, to Padre Pio. These findings began to point to a clear scenario. Something extraordinary had happened there, and it was precisely this combination of facts that prompted the Vatican to consider that this could, in fact, be a legitimate miracle. But before making a final decision, it was necessary to move on to the definitive stage, the one that separates simple coincidences from truly supernatural phenomena. After months of studies, analyses, and interviews, the Vatican's Medical and Theological Commission finally reached the most important point in the entire investigation, deciding whether Matteo's cure was merely a rare medical event or whether it truly surpassed the limits of what science is capable of explaining. And it was here that all paths began to converge toward a conclusion that would thrill the entire world. The final report compiled everything: exams, medical records, charts, testimonies, and every detail observed during the hospitalization. The specialists confirmed without hesitation that Matteo was in a terminal state. They recorded the progressive organ failure, septic shock, drastic drop in blood pressure, critical oxygen saturation, all signs that life was slipping away. And then, suddenly, for no medical reason whatsoever, the body entered a state of accelerated recovery. This simply doesn't happen in scientific literature. There is no protocol, medication, or intervention capable of explaining such an abrupt turnaround. The committee then evaluated the second aspect, Matteo's account, and this point weighed heavily. He described Padre Pio's presence with absolute precision. He spoke of the scent of flowers, the hands touching his chest, the words he heard, the brown habit, and even the way the friar approached him. Too many details, too specific to be the product of imagination, especially for an unconscious child. Furthermore, Matteo recounted phrases spoken by the doctors at the exact moment he was unconscious, something impossible from a scientific perspective. The commission also analyzed the request for intercession made by his parents, precisely at the moment his condition improved. Nothing was isolated. Nothing was a random coincidence. Everything fit together like pieces of a supernatural puzzle. Finally, after reviewing each point, the Congregation for the Causes of Saints presented its conclusion to the Pope. The document stated, "Matteo Colella's cure is sudden, complete, and without scientific explanation. It is attributed to the intercession of Padre Pio." This verdict was fundamental in Padre Pio being officially recognized as a saint in 2002. That ordinary, frail boy on the verge of death became the protagonist of the miracle that sealed the canonization process. And the most exciting thing is that the story doesn't end there, because years later, Matteo would continue to be living proof of this miracle, walking, studying, living, and remembering every moment when, according to him, Padre Pio held his hand during his most difficult time. After the Vatican officially recognized the miracle, many believed the story ended there. But in reality, that was only the beginning of something even deeper. This is because when the Theological Commission delved into the writings, letters, and accounts left by Padre Pio, they discovered something that impressed everyone. He had already announced years before his death that he would continue helping those who suffer in ways that no one could explain. Padre Pio constantly told the faithful who knocked on his door, "Even after I'm gone, I'll make more noise dead than alive." And that phrase, so strange to some at the time, began to make sense when cases like Matteo's started to emerge. It was as if he was preparing the world to understand that his mission would not end with his last breath. On another occasion, the friar reportedly said, "I will continue to take care of my children when they can no longer fight." Powerful words, full of promise and spiritual responsibility. And when theologians analyzed this phrase in light of Matteo's miracle, the connection became impossible to ignore. Matteo, in the worst moments of his life, truly couldn't fight. His body was fading, his breathing was minimal, and his strength had already disappeared. And it was precisely at that moment that, according to the boy himself, Padre Pio appeared and said, "I am with you." For many scholars, this encounter was no coincidence. It seemed a direct response to the promises that the friar himself had recorded, and that is why Matteo's case is not just an isolated miracle. It is seen as living confirmation that Padre Pio kept his word to his devotees to remain present even beyond life. Some religious people say that Matteo's case is the perfect illustration of what they call the spiritual fidelity of Padre Pio, a love so strong for those who suffer that not even death could stop it. And when Matteo grew up and began to tell the story for himself, many realized that this miracle was not just a healing, but also a message, a reminder that Padre Pio's presence is not limited to the past. It continues to resonate in the present. And this echo becomes even more impressive when we see what happened to Matteo after the miracle, because his life was transformed in a way that no one would ever have expected. Over the years, Matteo not only recovered, he flourished. He grew up, studied, had new experiences, and built a completely normal life, as if none of that tragedy had happened. But in truth, everyone knew that something extraordinary had marked his story forever. He became, unintentionally, living proof of a miracle, and this shaped his life in a way that still moves those who know the story firsthand. When he reached adolescence, Matteo began giving accounts of his experience, and surprisingly, each time he spoke, he repeated everything with the same certainty he had in childhood. There was no doubt, no hesitation, no change in his account. For him, that dawn was etched in his memory as if it had happened yesterday. He would say, "Father Pio held my hand. He said I would return." Those who heard these words were moved to tears. It wasn't a rehearsed speech. It was something lived, felt, deeply. And observing Matteo, no one could imagine that this smiling young man had once been on the brink of death. His health was stable, his body showed no after effects, his mind was clear. It was as if a miracle had not only saved his life, but also restored everything that the disease had destroyed. As an adult, Matteo began to frequently visit the sanctuary of San Giovanni Rotondo, where Padre Pio lived, prayed, and suffered for the faithful throughout the world. He never hid his gratitude. On the contrary, he always made a point of making it clear that he believed he had received a second chance, and that this second chance had a reason. Many pilgrims began to seek him out, wanting to hear his story firsthand. They wanted to understand how someone so young could carry such a profound experience. And to the surprise of many, Matteo always spoke simply, almost like a child recounting something natural. "I am here because he touched me." This heartfelt testimony spread throughout Italy and reached several other countries. For many devotees, Matteo represents what Padre Pio always promised, that he would continue caring for those who suffer even after leaving this world. And wherever he goes, his story continues to awaken faith, hope, and a question that echoes in the hearts of those who listen. If Padre Pio did this once, how many other times could he have done it without anyone knowing? And it is precisely at this point that this story finds its strongest moment, the conclusion, because what happened to Matteo was not just a miracle, it was a sign that still changes lives today. And now the time has come to close this journey with a final reflection and a direct invitation for you. After following this entire journey, from the moment Matteo entered the hospital exhausted, through the mysterious apparition that changed the course of that day, and culminating in the official recognition by the Vatican, it's impossible not to feel that this story carries something greater than a simple miracle. It carries a profound reminder of hope, faith, and the silent presence that many believe accompanies those who suffer. Matteo's case is not just moving, it is living. Proof that even when all seems lost, something unexpected can happen. And perhaps that's what makes this story so powerful, because it makes us look at our own struggles and ask, could it be that in the most difficult moments, we were also helped without realizing it? Matteo's story shows that the impossible can happen in ways that science cannot explain, and that life can change in an instant, sometimes with an invisible gesture, a gentle word, or a presence that arrives at the exact moment when fear is greatest. When Matteo says he heard, "I'm with you," he's not just recounting something he experienced. He's sharing a message that can reach anyone. No one is as alone as they imagine. And that's exactly what makes this miracle so special. He speaks not only of the past, but also of the present and even the future. He reminds us that there is a support that cannot be seen, but can be felt. A force that can touch, heal, comfort, and transform lives. And now I want to know from you, do you believe that Padre Pio is still active in the world today? Have you ever felt protected when all seemed lost? Share your experience in the comments. Your story can help others who are going through difficult times. If this video touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. The more people we reach, the more stories can be transformed. Thank you for watching until the end. May the peace, hope, and light that enveloped Matteo that morning also accompany you. And remember, when everything seems impossible, that might be precisely the moment when the miracle begins.
Hear the true prophetic message.